Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Zoom webinar. Buongiorno, benvenute e benvenuti. My name is Anna Maria Di Giorgio and I'm the director of the Italian Cultural Institute in San Francisco. And I'm particularly glad to be here today and open this webinar on the occasion of the exhibition Color into Line, Pastels from the Renaissance to the Present at Legion of Honor Museum with two special guests, one from San Francisco and the other one from Florence. So Furio Rinaldi, curator of drawings and prints at the Fine Arts Museum of San Francisco and curator of the above mentioned exhibition, and Laura Da Rin Bettina from Uffizi Museums in Florence. Laura, Furio, thank you both so much for being with us today. And thank you, Laura, as for you is dinner time in Italy. A special thank goes to our Consulate General in San Francisco and our Consul General Sergio Strozzi for constantly supporting the cultural activities of the IEC, and to Legion of Honor Museum. We had many occasions to cooperate this year, despite the pandemic, starting with the amazing Pompeii exhibition, going through the presentation on Rosalba Carriero's Pastels with curator Xavier Salomon and Furio Rinaldi at Gun Theater last week, and finally today with this joint webinar. And let me stress out once again how happy am I of this fruitful cooperation. And please allow me to thank publicly Thomas Campbell, the director of Legion of Honor, and his entire staff. So coming back to our webinar today, the Renaissance of Pastel. Pastel was invented and refined in the early 16th century and achieving widespread popularity and usage in the 18th century, and is one of the most expressive and adaptable media in art history, surviving nearly unchanged for 5 centuries of human creativity and design. So Furio Rinaldi will now illustrate the evolution of pastels through some masterworks currently on view and exhibition Color into Line that you might visit until February 13, 2022, while Laura Da Rin Bettina will explore the complex origins of the medium in Renaissance Italy. So Furio Rinaldi is a curator of drawings and prints at the Fine Arts Museum of San Francisco. The Fine Arts Museums are the largest collection of works on paper in the Western United States and the third in the country. Rinaldi received his PhD from the University of Rome and is an expert of 15th and 16th century Italian drawings, particularly the schools of Botticelli, Leonardo, and Raphael. He had co-organized and contributed to a number of exhibitions in Italy and United States, and extensively published on the subject on scholarly publications and books. A former specialist of Old Masters and 19th century drawings at Christie's, New York, his curatorial experience includes positions in the Department of Drawings and Prints at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and Pinacoteca di Brera, Milan. And as I said, is the curator of the exhibition Color into Line, Pastels from the Renaissance to the Present, currently on view at the Legion of Honor. Laura Da Rin Bettina received her PhD in History of Art from the University of Parma with a dissertation on the use of pastel in 16th century Italy. In 2014, she joined Progetto E Plus, a multi-year cataloging project of the drawings collection at the Galleria degli Uffizi in Florence. And her research centers on 16th and 17th century Italian drawings. Her recent and upcoming publications reflect her interest in the history of the Uffizi graphic collection, as well as in the work of Raphael, Parmigianino, and the School of Parma. She has also worked on a number of exhibitions, including L'Amico Rivisitato, disegni di Amico Aspertini e di altri bolognesi in 2015 at Galleria degli Uffizi, and Dipingere e disegnare da Gran Maestro, il talento di Elisabetta Sirani, painting and drawings as a great master, the talent of Elisabetta Sirani, Uffizi 2018. So now, before giving the floor to our guest, a quick note. At the end of the conference, Professor Rinaldi and Professoressa Da Rin will answer some questions. So you can write a question in Italian or in English, as you prefer, in the Q&A, and I'll collect them and moderate a little bit, and we will answer your question later on. And now, with no further ado, I give the floor to Professor Furio Rinaldi. Furio, thank you so much again.
Thank you, Anna Maria. I really wish to thank you and the Italian Cultural Institute for their constant support of our programs, our exhibition programs, our scholarship. I'm very grateful to you and the Consul General for being there for us, especially in a challenging year. And I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Hope you see it. And this is just the antipasto, just a preview to what is the main course, which is, of course, Laura's incredible study on the 16th century pastels. But the idea of this presentation, of course, stems from our current exhibition, now on view at the Legion of Honor, current line pastels from the Renaissance to the present. It's on view through February 13. I invite everyone who's in the area or in the US to come. Actually, they just reopened the flights from Europe, so Europeans have no excuse. The idea of the exhibition started from actual review of our collection, our ongoing cataloging project of the collection. And as soon as I arrived to the museum a little more than a year and a half ago, we realized that the collection of pastels was particularly strong from the 16th century to the 21st century. It's an incredibly vast and diverse collection that was amassed over the years through wise curatorial purchases, gifts, donations, and it constitutes basically the backbone of the exhibition and its main narrative. This exhibition, it's collection-based, and it allowed us to recatalog, treat, stabilize, restore a lot of the pastels on display, not only the works, but their supports, the frames, and I am incredibly indebted to our conservation team, paper conservation and object and painting conservations at the Fine Arts Museum of San Francisco. Particularly, I want to thank Victoria Binder, head of paper conservation. The collection at the museum is, as I said, the core of the exhibition, but later in the process, I decided to pool some additional works for loan that kind of fill the gaps in our own collection. And all of the works that we have borrowed are from local collections, a collection of San Francisco and the Bay Area, and in general, Northern California. So this exhibition is truly a celebration of the artistry of pastel to our local collection. It was our pandemic project in a way. We were all at home kind of looking within, and we realized that, you know, we have an amazing richness and wealth of works on paper collection in the area. So this is the time to celebrate them. Audience who will come to the exhibition in San Francisco will be greeted by, in this very large hall, we have designed and assembled 3 cases showing what is really pastel, what is made of. As Anna Maria anticipated at the beginning, pastel survived nearly unchanged for 400, 500 years of creativity and design. And it's made of 3 things. It's pure color, basically pure pigment, mixed with a dry filler, which is usually kaolin or chalk, and a binder that holds the stick together. Usually it's a vegetable gum. The amount of filler, so the amount of white chalk or kaolin dictates the opacity of the stick. So more filler, you have lighter tones like grays, pinks, light blues, while less filler, you have darker tones, purple, lampjack black, dark blues, and also less filler means a more soft pastel, more suited for a pictorial finish and covering, while more fillers originates as harder pastel, which is very good for detail work, for drawing, for line work. The first room is dedicated to the Renaissance of pastel. And as with Laura, we are about to see, Leonardo da Vinci had an incredibly important role in defining the medium as we know it today. He left a recipe on how to make a pastel. He designed a little machine, which is illustrated in our exhibition catalog, and Laura is going to show it later. However, very few of his surviving drawings show the use of color, which was an incredibly important aspect of his thinking for the graphic arts in terms of coloring and chromatic effects. So very few of Leonardo's drawings show the use of color, but his pupils are really an expression, direct expression of the master's teachings. And in the exhibition, you'll be greeted by a fantastic, very large head studied by his follower from Piemonte, Bernardino Luinix. It's a beautiful head of a veiled woman looking down. It is on view for the first time with this attribution. It was attributed to Gaudenzio Ferrari before, and it's a very welcomed and rare loan from the Santa Barbara Museum of Art. So we're very, very grateful. The first drawing from our own collection that shows an interesting use of color chalks, fabricated color chalks, and we'll get into the differences between that and pastel later on, is this Cavaliere d'Arpino, a figure study of a man with a spade. It's a preparatory study for fresco in Rome, with basically Romulus outlining the foundation of Rome, the limits of Rome. And this man here is really breaking the ground to build the city walls. So it's a groundbreaking moment for the history of Rome, but also a groundbreaking moment for the history of drawing and pastel. Look at our Arpino with such a sensitive color sense, applies this mix of red and white chalk to create this peach color, and infuses the study, the male figure, with a higher sense of that naturalism, certainly higher than it could achieve without the colors. Beautiful example of a mannerist drawing. So it's all about the elegance of the body, the ornamental elegance of the body. We see him almost effortlessly, breaking the ground like in a ballet pose. So it's not really about the accuracy or the anatomical effort, but something else. We are in an elegant world of draftsmanship. Fast forward, pastel, because it approximates the skin texture and velvety quality of the skin very well, it becomes a medium that is primarily used for portraiture. This is true already in the 16th century, but even more so in the 17th century with Vouet, with Ottavio Leoni, and also especially in the 18th century. We have a fantastic example here of a work by Alexander Roslin, who teaches his wife on how to use pastel. And this leads to a very, very important aspect of the medium, which is its social history aspect. Pastel is a medium that is historically tied to women artists. This is why in the exhibition, every room has at least 3 women artists, which is really remarkable for an exhibition that is so heavy on old masters and 19th century works. Of course, the person who dictated the fortune of pastel among women artists and completely changed the game in its use is Rosalba Carriera, shown here with a detail of a pastel on display and our own pastel from the collection at right. Rosalba was incredibly important for the development of pastel. She was very experimental in its use. She mixed pastel with water and spread it with a brush, which gave pastel this kind of pictorial finish, very different from the sketchy drawing-like appearance that he had in the 16th and 17th century. For her talent and for her incredible success, she was accepted by the Accademia Clementina in Bologna, the Accademia di San Luca in Rome, and most notably by the Académie Royale in Paris, in a moment where regulation against admitting women were on. Rosalba was incredibly influential for artists of her time and afterwards. Jean-Baptiste Perronneau and Jeanette Lyotard, again, 2 works from our own collection that have been restored, treated, and newly attributed, as in the case for the Lyotard. These are fantastic object. They are life-size, and when you see them in person, you're really in front of what it's almost you're in front of the real person. Nothing like Pastel gives you the tactile and feeling of the presence of the person. So it's no surprise that it was particularly fortunate and used during the 18th century. I want to indulge a little bit looking at the detail of the newly attributed leotard. Look at how the waistcoat is done, the silk quality, the fur lining, the lace is such an incredible tour de force that shows the mastery of Pastel in this century and by these artists in particular. And also is the cover of our catalog, so looks really, really good. Second section is dedicated to nature. It is not really widely known that green pastel was only formulated in a stabilized way and popularized and sold only later in the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century. Elisabeth Louis Vigée-Lebrun, the famed artist from the late 18th century, was renowned across Europe for her portraits, specifically for the ones of the Queen Marie Antoinette. But her true groundbreaking role was being a landscape artist. She was the one who introduced and applied pastel to landscapes. She does so when she leaves in exile Paris for Switzerland in 1708, and then she continues to produce pastel landscapes based on the surroundings that she sees, both in Switzerland and in the surrounding in France. Having the green pastel available allowed artists to depict in a more convincing way their surroundings and also, landscape, still life. So it's a complete new chapter for the history of the medium in terms of the subjects that were available. Vigée-Lebrun, by her own count, she kept a diary of her life, and she said that she produced more than 200 landscapes done in pastel. Unfortunately, only about 15-20 survive. This is a new acquisition from the museum, which is unveiled for the exhibition. We're very, very happy. The only other landscape by Vigée-Lebrun in an American public collection is in Minneapolis, I believe. So it's really a fantastic new addition to our collection. And the other innovation, so to speak, in the 19th century is that pastel, thanks to Millet, shifts away from the ostentatious portrait manner, aristocratic portrait manner of the Ancien Regime, and is brought back to its drawing nature in an intimate scale, humble subjects, as we can see in this fantastic pastel by Millet on loan from the Crocker Art Museum. As you can see, Millet doesn't go for the pictorial, covering finish of pastel, but leaves the underdrawing and the structure of the drawing in black chalk or Conté crayon very visible, and adds touches of color to blend the light between the exterior and the interior in a very convincing and soft way. Also, we're not seeing a portrait of a aristocrat or a lady of royalty, but it's a domestic, humble subject of a woman, a mother, teaching how to sew to her daughter. So very touching and a very intimate scale of pastel, which were very successful for him. So in Millet, as other artists in the 19th century, in their use of pastel for other than portraiture and in a different way, in a more experimental way, they certainly paved the way to the Impressionist artists who, the era of Impressionists marks the strongest resurgence of pastel in the 18th century. You could, pastel could be, through pastel, you could render your subject in a very quick way. The high-keyed color, the highly saturated colors were all elements that, of course, appealed to the Impressionists. And the room in the exhibition dedicated to Impressionists is one of the most powerful, I would say, thanks to many fantastic works from the collection and loans, including these 4 dancers, one of the late great Degas. You can see you're really plunged into the scene of these 4 dancers who are either tired for having danced the first act, or they're waiting and ready to go back into the scene. The background is this incredibly electric mix of colors manipulated with water, with fingers scratched out. Such an amazing tour de force in the daring use of pastel, and even more so in the very large seated bather drawing her neck from our own collection. Again, one of Degas' most famous later works. You can see every single stroke, you can see every single line that Degas applied on this work in order to create this amazing fiery tapestry of material that is held together by fixative and other elements that we have analyzed and in the cataloging process of the exhibition. Mary Cassatt, of course, again, another highlights from our own collection. Cassatt learned the mastery of pastel through Degas. Degas was very particular about his own pastels. He was producing his own, one of the few that he was doing that. He wanted them to be absolutely not glossy, de-oiled. So was very particular, almost fastidious about it. And Cassatt, again, is a direct expression of Degas' teachings, but then evolved also as an artist and acquired an even more classical monumental style. This particular work was one of the few that Degas owned in his own private collection. It has the Degas stamp on the back, and for a very long time, it was attributed to Degas himself before it was rediscovered and reattributed to Mary Cassatt. We are now fully in the 20th century, and the following sections and rooms in the exhibition want to show how pastel is not just relegated as a medium for portraiture or for landscape, but is really embedded in the design process, in every step of the design process for modern artists. We have 2 beautiful sketchbook pages by Richard Diebenkorn, an artist really beloved here in the in California and in the US. In his tiny sketchbook cases, sketchbook sheets, Diebenkorn was really testing through oil pastel, through the saturated glossy oil pastel, the color combination and the geometry of his monumental canvases. You can see how it really started through also incision and a fantastic combination of materials. So early sketchbooks, tiny, just to block early ideas, to fully finished cartoons. What is a cartoon? Is the full-scale design used to transfer the drawing from paper to mural. Whether you're doing a fresco or a mosaic, cartoons are essential. In this case, it's a surviving drawing by Diego Rivera for the head of the Allegory of Music in his mural in Mexico City. So monumental. When you see it in person, it's really striking. Used for this fresco, and Rivera was a master of pastel as well, as attested by other works in the exhibition and by him and his followers. Naturally, being the exhibition collection based and having taken the collection as a point of entry for the exhibition, we had a preferred point of view for California artists. And I'm not from here, so coming from outside, I always thought that Wayne Thiebaud was truly one of the great modern masters of pastel. He's turning 101 years old this week, and we are very grateful to have works from his own private collection, as well from other collections of the city that attest to every decade of his career, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, including this incredibly beguiling trompe-l'oeil of pastel scatter. These are Thiebaud's own pastels, drawn in pastel. So he was able to capture the chalky essence of the medium while portraying it, on this table. Look at the heavy shadows, the strong colors. It's a fantastic work by the artist from 1972. And while the entire exhibition is really a celebration of color, of the power of color and of pastel. The last room is just works done in black and white with black and white pastels, Conte crayon mixed with pastel, contemporary works by contemporary artists. The selection is very diverse and interesting. We have this amazing Claudio Bravo package. It's a beautiful example from his series developed in the 1960s. Beautifully executed with this polished technique of Conte crayon and pastel. It really doesn't get any better than that. The scale is also beautiful, and it's such a mysteriously uncanny work. The only splash of color in the last room is by two artists, Donna Anderson Cam and this John Mitchell, a very large pastel that she executed at the very end of his career and life, 1991, so shortly before she died. She moved from Chicago to France. She bought a house very close to Giverny, the legendary garden of Monet. And she was certainly inspired by Monet, water lilies and landscapes. And also she was greatly admirative of other impressionists working. So this work is kind of an homage to her inspiration. And it's so touching and even moving to see it a few rooms apart from the great impressionist artist that she beloved. So I hand it over to Laura now. This is the catalog of the exhibition. I am so grateful and in debt to Laura's and her research on pastel. She is quoted 100 million times in my essay here. Her study on early Italian drawings done with color chalks and pastel is seminal. So I'm very happy that she's with us today. And let me stop sharing my screen and hand it to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Furio, for your kind words, too kind. And I want to thank, of course, also Anna Maria Di Giorgio and Furio for inviting me to join this webinar today. So I will share my screen. Okay. The emergence of pastel drawing in Renaissance Italy dates to the very first years of the 16th century. The first examples of pastels can be found in northern Italy, in Milan and Lombardy. And as Furio said, Leonardo da Vinci played a fundamental role in the development of this technique. Leonardo left 4 laws regarding pastels, dating to the time of his execution of the Last Supper in Santa Maria delle Grazie in Milan, or shortly afterward, between 1493 and 1499. I'm showing you one of them, where the master draws a mold for the making of pastel sticks. In his writings, Leonardo takes notes on recipes for the fabrication of pastels. He also mentions a French painter, Jean Pereal, writing that he wants to learn from him the method of coloring in a dry form, that is pastel. Leonardo might have learned from Pereal some techniques of drawings with colored chalks, since French artists had also been exploring the possibilities of the combination of black and red chalks, especially in portraits and head studies. But we can also find some examples of combined use of red and black chalks in Italy. So Leonardo was probably already aware of this technique, which he developed even further. In the past, the portrait of Isabella d'Este, Duchess of Mantova, a city in northern Italy, not far from Milan, has been regarded as the only pastel by Leonardo. The master made this portrait around 1499 while traveling from Milan to Florence. The study is freaked for transfer, but Leonardo never painted Isabella's portrait. This drawing is made with a complex technique. Using a metal point, Leonardo sketched the contours of the figure, and then he went over it with natural red and black chalks. Black and red chalks can be found in nature, while, as we now know, pastels are fabricated chalks. scholars have considered Pastel, this yellow ribbon on Isabella's dress. But lately, technical studies have revealed that the yellow pigment is more likely a liquid medium, not a dry one like a pastel. However, here, the combined use of black and red chalks blended for a pictorial effect attests Leonardo's interest in color drawing techniques and in the sfumato, that is the rendering of shadows and atmospheric effects. In fact, since the 1490s, the artists started to rely more and more on black and red chalks for figural drawing. These techniques were suitable for his pictorial aims, as chalks could be more easily blended and smudged to reach sophisticated effects of chiaroscuro. So even if we don't have any pastel drawing by Leonardo, it is clear that from his notes on pastels and from his interest in polychromatic drawings, that the master was the pioneer of the pastel technique in Lombardy, especially because the earliest pastel drawings were made by Milanese and Lombard artists closely influenced by Leonardo. Giovanni Antonio Boltraffio was Leonardo's pupil, and he worked in his studio in Milan. His 4 large-scale drawings today at the Biblioteca Ambrosiana in Milan can be considered the earliest Italian pastels, dating between 1502 and 1508. They are very similar in size, they are very large drawings, and in subject, they all look like bust-length portraits. And they are drawn on beige paper with a very complex technique. Now, today I will focus just on one sheet, the most fascinating one, in my opinion. This feminine figure is sketched with black chalk and metal point on prepared paper. Then red chalk and a peach and brown pastels color the face, the neck, and the hair. Chalks and pastels are applied using parallel and return strokes like this, and everything is carefully blended, perhaps even with a brush, to create a pictorial image and a dreamy atmosphere. There is also white body color, a liquid medium applied with a brush, on the collar and around the head of the figure. This portrait of a woman was the model for the Saint Barbara altarpiece commissioned to Boltraffio in 1502 for a church in Milan, and today in Berlin. So the drawing can be considered a preliminary study for this painting. On the other hand, you can see some differences between the painting and the drawing. The woman on the sheet is looking down, while the saint has her eyes wide open, and the eyes are sketched on a separate study on the upper half of the sheet. The dress and the accessories of the women are different. Also, the cut of the composition and the focus on the expression indicate that the drawing may be a study for a portrait. On the other hand, some scholars propose that the drawing might be an independent picture, not related to any painting, even if it was later used for one at the Saint Barbara. This bust by Andrea Solario, a Milanese artist closely influenced by Leonardo, is a preparatory study for the figure standing on the right in the Assumption of the Virgin in the Certosa of Pavia, near Milan. The later addition of a hand in pen and ink, made by the artist himself, suggests that the drawing was later kept in the artist's studio, maybe as an autonomous work of art. This drawing was in the past extensively restored, so it looks a little different from the Boltraffio's drawings. But if you look closely at its original features, you can see that Boltraffio's drawings and this study share similarities in the large scale, in the composition, and of course, in the drawing technique. But pastels weren't applied only with this colorful and pictorial graphic style. In this portrait by Bernardino Luinix, another Lombard painter, color is limited only to certain areas of the sheets, but is used in a very effective way. The figure is traced with fine lines of black chalk, and color highlights the focal points of this portrait. Red chalk warms the face and the hand carrying a fan. Brown chalk, or maybe a red chalk sketched over black chalk, colors the hair of the lady, while her headdress, which is called balzo in Italian, is painted with a bright yellow pastel. The vertical parallel lines and strokes of the pastel suggest the texture of the fabric. This subtle use of color is probably a reference to another portrait of a lady, the Isabella d'Este by Leonardo. This pastel by Bernardino Luinix, which was shown earlier on by Furio and is currently on view at the exhibition Coloring to Line, shows, in my opinion, a similar taste for a more delicate use of pastel. Outside Lombardy, there are very few examples of pastels dating to the first half of the 16th century, like this one in the Uffizi galleries. The drawing is ascribed to Bartolomeo Ramenghi, known as Bagnacavallo, from his native town in Emilia-Romagna, northern Italy. Bagnacavallo was active in Bologna, and it's not by chance that we have a pastel done by a Bolognese artist. In fact, in 1500, Boltraffio painted the Palacasio, an altarpiece for a church in Bologna. So it is likely that local painters came in contact with drawings by Boltraffio and consequently with the pastel technique. We don't know the identity of the sitter, nor the painting for which this sheet is a preliminary study. The drawing is made with a very soft black chalk, white chalk for the color, red chalk and a peachy pink pastel for the face. Blue paper will be popular in pastels because it provided a colored background and a middle tone, allowing the colors to pop more. You may have noticed so far that all the drawings that I've shown you depict hats and portraits. Colored chalks and pastels were in fact the perfect media to render portraits and face studies, because color allows not only a more naturalistic representation, but also the study of expression, as you can see in the reflective attitude of this man. On the other hand, pastel was also a way to investigate other aspects. This study by Giuseppe Porta, a Tuscan artist who worked in Venice as well as in Rome, is currently on view at the Berkeley Art Museum for the exhibition The Enduring Drawing, 7 Centuries of Art from the Great Collection, and you can see it until the end of this month. It's a figure study for a large fresco in the Sala Regia in the Vatican, painted between 1562 and 1565, that depicts the peace between Pope Alexander III and Federico Barbarossa. I'm showing you only a section of this large composition, and you can see the figure in the large crowd pointing to the focus of the scene. In the drawing, a yellow pastel describes his bright jacket, which is the main feature of this figure that has to stand out in the crowd. Likewise, in this sketch by Raphael, probably related to the frescoes of the Sala di Costantino in the Vatican, these bright reds, oranges, and yellows highlight the magnificence of the robes and the solemnity of the papal procession. I have to underline, though, that while in this drawing, the black chalk drawing is for sure authentic, the colored parts may be a later addition, since Raphael's use of pastel is very unusual, and also the handling of color here on this sheet is very bold and very different from the more delicate and subtle underdrawing. Moving on to a later on in the 16th century, since the 1560s, Federico Barocci, a painter from Urbino in central Italy, made hundreds of pastels. He was the first artist to really explore the possibilities of this technique. As John Sherman wrote, in Barocci, the drawing process cannot be separated from that of painting, and color has a central role in his drawings. The artist is best known for his beautiful head studies, which were admired, copied, and collected early on. Barocci made head studies in chalks and pastel, sometimes as large as the related figure in the painting, to establish tonal and color effects and to study also the facial expressions. He very likely produced these studies in the final stages of the design process, even when he had already started painting. This remarkable drawing is a study for the Virgin in the Madonna of the Cat, and this is a life study made in the studio, maybe using a young Garzone as a model, but at the same time, it is a dreamy and idealized image. In Barocci's heads, sometimes we have a strong naturalism, and that suggests that these drawings were made from life, while other heads were made from his imagination. Barocci also produced a large number of hand studies to investigate tonal effects and expression again. In this drawing for the portrait of Count Federico Bonaventura, Barocci had already established the position of the left hand. Instead, he made 3 sketches for the right hand resting on the chair. Finally, he added color and finish to the final pose with a light pink pastel and red chalk. This rare compositional study made with pastel for the Annunciation in the Vatican is one of Barocci's graphic masterpieces. The drawing is executed with soft chalks and pastels with an impressionistic style. The focus of this drawing is not on the details of the composition, even if the artist has already established the main features of his design. The aim of this drawing is to investigate the general atmosphere of the painting and to prepare the light effects. Despite the central role of color in Barocci's drawing, the artist still relies heavily on line to construct his images, while he uses color to investigate light and emotion and expression. For example, in this figure study for the musician in the Madonna del Popolo, with the black chalk, Barocci establishes the position of the figure, the movement of his hand, and the pose of the head. And instead, he uses a peachy pink pastel to focus on the ecstatic expression of the blind musician. Also, a red chalk is used in a very limited way to give warmth and to define the shadows. Jacopo Bassano, an artist active in late 16th century Veneto, from the late 1550s, explored, like Barocci, the possibilities of the pastel technique, but with a much different outcome. While Barocci sticks to a limited palette of peaches, pale pinks, sometimes ochre, Bassano displays a wider range of colors, as you can see in this figure study, where he uses bright yellows, oranges, purples, and blues. His pastel drawings are bolder than Barocci's. Bassano builds his images with color, as if he wanted to skip the drawing process to get directly to the act of painting. Sometimes he has an expressionistic style, like here, while in other sheets, he uses a more subtle technique. For example, in this drawing, soft and blended strokes of pastel suggest the trembling or the shaking of two rabbits in the grass. This large-scale drawing at the Uffizi, similar in size and composition to the pastels I showed you at the beginning of this presentation, the Milanese one, was recognized as a drawing by the Bolognese artist Annibale Carracci. In this image, Carracci is influenced by both Barocci and Bassano. The face of Saint Lucy is carefully blended with pink pastel and red chalk, and it recalls the head studies by Barocci, while the bold red and yellow of the dress seem related to Bassano's range of pastels. I want to end this presentation with another drawing on display at the exhibition Coloring to Line by the Venetian Carletto Cagliari, dating to the end of the 16th century. This is a study for a portrait. It could be also an independent work. To me, it is a good example of how later on in the 17th and 18th century especially, pastels will be used mainly, although not exclusively, for independent portraits. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Furio. I think this webinar was really amazing and very interesting, and I already received some questions in the chat. So the first question I received from Daniela is, what's the difference between a modern pastel and the color chalks used in the Renaissance? How were these colors, let's say, Furio help me, built? How were these colors created?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one as Laura as a glass of water. Basically, in the early 16th century, we call them pastels, but what they are in fact are natural color chalks, basically minerals mined directly from the earth and with minor manipulation, sharpening used on drawings. It is very, very difficult to understand whether the stick was natural or fabricated based on analysis done on Renaissance drawings. But generally, we can say that those were all natural stones, basically, which means that the color palette, the color range was very limited to a range of oranges, reds, browns, of course, black and white chalk. Very, very, very rarely we encountered natural color chalks in blues or purples. We saw the fantastic Bassano that Laura has shown from Darmstadt, Hessisches Landesmuseum, which has colors of almost an abstract expressionist artist. I mean, bright orange, deep purple, blue, a hint of green, but that was really extraordinary for the time because those colors were, when they were obtained naturally, were highly unstable. So it's really a rarity that they have survived in that way.
Thank you, Furio. Thank you. Laura, are there, Maria asks, are there cases in which early modern Italian artists used red chalk and red pastels in the same drawing?
This is a very interesting and tough question. And to my knowledge and to my experience, when you see red chalk in these 16th century drawings, it is most of the times it is a natural chalk because it was readily available, and it may be sometimes artists would like refine these natural chalks, and they are called fabricated chalks, but they are not pastels, they are something different. And so it's not until the 17th century that we really can find red pastel. And the difference between to the eye, the difference between a pastel and a natural chalk is the consistency, the opacity, the homogeneity. Is it a word in English? I don't know. And so this is my answer. To my knowledge, most of the time, it is a natural red chalk.
Thank you, Laura. So Furio, for Jacopo Bassano, Jeffrey asked, for Jacopo Bassano to have so many pastel, or Laura, okay, so it's on Jacopo Bassano, to have so many pastel colors available, was there already a widespread production of pastels, or did he invent new color himself?
That's another tough question. I would say certainly there wasn't a manufacture of pastel. The sources, literary sources, drawing manuals of the 16th century, they make no mention of a store, a shop where someone could buy colors. So it was very much left to the workshop practice of producing your own sticks and colors and color material. Yeah. We are still in a post-Renaissance kind of environment. As I said, the color range of Bassano, and sometimes with Barocci as well, it's really strange and unusual. I think they were finding particular stones or grinding and mixing pigments in a very daring experimental way, but it wasn't something available to the market.
Yes, I agree. They were made in the workshop, in the studio. Yes, I agree with Furio.
I just want to answer quickly Lydia Zane, who asked when was oil used in the formulation of pastels. Very interesting. So generally, I would say the 20th century technological advancement in the petroleum industry enabled the manufacture of pastel with oil or wax, which are really the crayon that we use as kids. They are characterized by highly saturated colors, and they don't stain the fingers, so the stick is really very easy to manage. So it's a 20th century thing, the oil pastel and wax pastel. However, Leonardo's first recipe, and Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, mentions wax in the ingredients of pastel. So as always, Leonardo was ahead of his time.
So we have another question. The examples we looked at today are very much drawings, whereas by the time Rosalba Carriera creates these pastels, they are referred to as painting. When does this shift when does this shift happen? So how they are viewed and used really occur? Sorry, it's.
Yeah, I'll take this one as well. I think for Laura's drawings, all the 16th century drawings were very much into the drawing world. They're preparatory for works, and only later on they become somewhat independent works of art. She's shown the Bassano, of course, another example, but we're still in a world where drawing is ancillary to something else. For Rosalba, even the drawing treatises, art treatises of the time, they reference pastel as pastel painting. It has completely merged into the world of painting. The canvases and the sheets of paper increase their size. They become more and more similar to what a painting is. And also the covering is, they have, pastel, develop this pictorial finish that it's really similar to painting. I don't know if Laura, you want to add something about this.
I see a question. Are there any pastel studies for Leonardo Salvator Mundi? Not to my knowledge. I don't know if Furio knows any.
No, just a red chalk for the hands. And yeah.
Yes. We have a lot of drawings which are called pastels, related to Leonardo's frescoes and other paintings, but most of the times they are copies, in my opinion, or later reworked as pastels.
There are lots of questions going on, so I will say the final 3 questions. Do you feel like answering to the final 3 questions?
Yeah, I can go ahead with something that I see in the really Q&A very quick. The green pastel, where does the green pigment come from? So green was used, and the artists tried to experiment with mixing, for example, pink and blue, yellow and blue before, but it was highly unstable in the 18th century and 17th century, and it turned into dark tones, so it was really unreliable. The actual green pastel was developed based on emerald and verde green, which was toxic and poisonous. So it took some time before having a stable, safe green pastel. And in the exhibition, we addressed this evolution in a specific section of landscape drawings. All pastel, we said it. Okay. Anna Maria, you decide.
Yeah, we have another question. Jeffrey, did Rosalba make preparatory drawings, or did she work directly with pastels on the product?
She did make preparatory drawings. Very few have survived, but she did.
Okay, and so I think it's because what kind of fixative were used in early pastels, what all is, so I think you answers all the questions, Furio.
Yeah.
So yeah, you and Laura. And so I thank you once again for being here with us today, for answering all these interesting questions. Thanks once again to our Consul General, to my colleagues in North America who have shared this link, to Legion of Honor Museum, and to the people who connected with us today from Italy and US, showing this interest. And I also would like to remind you a special event, a free event we're offering in person, finally, at Castro Theatre on November 13 at 6:30 p.m. Dante's Inferno silent movie with live orchestra. So please come. Everyone is welcome. You just need to register on our website. So please follow us, website, YouTube channel, social network, or subscribe to our newsletter to keep up to date. And I hope you enjoyed this webinar as we did. Please stay safe, enjoy the rest of the day, and thank you for your attention. Grazie Furio, grazie Laura ancora.
Thank you so much.
Grazie.